Well, good afternoon, everybody. So as we begin our Sabbath this evening, our readings offer us a message that's quite beautiful in their simplicity, but at the same time, deeply challenging. Love God and love your neighbor. Jesus teaches us that these two commandments are at the heart of the law and the foundation of our Christian faith. Everything else flows from those two loves. But I suspect if we were to do a survey, we'd quickly discover it's easier said than done. So let's begin with the first part, loving God. Maybe it seems easier. For many, faith is experienced more as a list of rules than a relationship. In fact, when we first hear the words from Deuteronomy, it seems to reinforce that point, because you will obey the voice of the Lord, keeping the commandments and statutes. Now, it's true, obedience matters in faith, but the danger is when we turn religion to nothing more than a moral code or a checklist. In our current day, how often politics or ideologies have replaced religion as a lens through which people view the world. The problem is these things don't fill the heart. In fact, they deepen the void in the heart. But Deuteronomy calls us back to something deeper. Return to the Lord your God with your whole heart and your whole being. Something deeper than just following a rule. It's an essence of love, a full return, a wholehearted response to an invitation from the Lord himself. It offers us a beautiful reassurance that this commandment is something deeper than a rule, that it's something divine. And as Catholics, going back to the Old Testament through the lens of the New Testament, we discover that this commandment is divine. It is the Word itself. That the Word is something very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart. In other words, God is not some far-off deity. He's not hidden. He's right here in our midst, already speaking within us. St. John Vianney, who we have camped out over here by the tabernacle, once said, "Our only occupation here on earth is that of loving God. That is, to start doing what we'll be doing for eternity. Our happiness," he preached, "consists in loving God. It can consist in nothing else." And that's worth repeating. Our happiness consists in loving God. It's that simple. And how many in our world are searching for that happiness that St. John Vianney speaks of, that the Lord offers us? And the reality is so many people in our world are quite deeply unhappy. We live in a world that tells us to chase pleasure or comfort or success. Whatever makes you happy, do it. How's that gone? Not very well. The rates of anxiety or loneliness and despair are higher than they've ever been in human history. We've been given permission to do whatever we want in the world. As a result, many just feel lost. Well, the missing piece to that sense of being lost, the missing piece to that search isn't more the world's idea of freedom, but rather more of living the love of God. Here at Our Lady of Fall River Catholic Community, our mission is clear. We're forming disciples of Jesus Christ through word, sacrament, and service, helping one another to connect to the Lord, to live in love with the Lord. And word, sacrament, and service are the tools that the Church gives us to help us to love God more fully. Through the Word, we have the Scriptures themselves that we can use in our prayer and in our study to learn more about the Lord, to allow the Lord to speak to us in our current situations, to touch the very depths of our heart, to initiate an encounter with the Lord in prayer. We have devotions like adoration, and the rosary, and Stations of the Cross, and others. We offer spiritual direction, formation opportunities like small groups. And these aren't just spiritual extras, but these are ways of being drawn closer to the one who dwells within our hearts already. Of course, the sacraments seems to make sense, right? Especially the Eucharist and reconciliation are direct encounters with the Lord. And we're blessed in our community that we have Mass offered 7 days a week. In addition, being in a city, we have nearby parishes that have Masses all throughout the morning. We have our noontime here Monday through Friday. We have 3 days a week that we're offering a 5:30 Mass. Lots of opportunities to gather at the table of the Lord, to be nourished by the Lord in the Eucharist itself. In addition, between our 3 parishes here, we have 5 hours of confession offered each week. There's a lot of sin in Fall River. Plus the other parishes in the area too. There's lots of opportunities for us to experience the Lord's healing and mercy and forgiveness and the grace to live the joy and the hope and the faith that comes from loving God. These aren't obligations. These are opportunities, invitations to love. But the commandment doesn't end with just love God. Jesus connects it to love of neighbor. The first part comes from Deuteronomy. The second part comes from Leviticus. So it's already part of the scriptural tradition. Jesus has now forever linked them, fused them together. In the Gospel today, our scholar of the law asked Jesus, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" A question that is asked many times in our world today by people of all ages, of all aspects of a journey of faith, or those who are looking for a journey of faith. At one of his first Wednesday audiences, Pope Leo said that this question reveals a certain kind of entitlement. Like eternal life is something that we're owed. See what I've done, this young man says, the scholar of law says, see what I've done, so tell me I'm all set, right? But reality, eternal life is the perfection of a loving relationship with God. It's not earned. It's received. It's lived. It's a state of perfect love with God. St. John will write in his first letter that if God loved us, well, we also ought to love one another. And hence, a very challenging question that's followed up by our gentleman in the gospel. Who is my neighbor? Careful what you ask, because you might just get an answer. And Jesus gives him an answer, doesn't he? Pope Leo will remind us on this passage that word neighbor translates literally as the one who is near. Think about that for a moment. Not just the one that we like or the one that we agree with, but the one who is near, the one who is right in front of us. And not only that, but we understand that literal translation. We now see a link to the first reading, right? That the Lord is near, and the one in front of us. Jesus will tell us in Matthew's Gospel, where 2 or 3 are gathered, there am I in their midst. Meaning God's not just present in a church building. He's present in our relationships, in our friendships and family. He's present in those who suffer. He's present in those who challenge us and drive us up a wall. Every human being is made in the image and likeness of God. And every neighbor is a dwelling place of the Lord. The gospel goes deeper. We hear the priest and Levite pass by the wounded man on the road. Again, Pope Leo offers quite a challenge in that reflection, because the priest and Levite were considered holy people, religious people. In fact, more than likely on this journey, they've been at temple and on their way home. And the Holy Father said, life is made up of many encounters, and in these encounters, we emerge for what we are. As I mentioned, the priest and Levite lived and served in the temple. But their example here shows us today that their worship did not translate into compassion. It didn't translate into a loving humanity. It reveals a disconnect. That faith and their religion and their practice were functions, actions, but disconnected from the rest of life. And now here's the challenge of the liturgy this weekend. Sometimes each of us here are that priest or that Levite. We go to church, we check the boxes, but our hearts may still be closed. But if we see ourselves in them today, it's not a moment for shame. It's a moment of grace. Because here again, the Lord's words to us in the first reading. Return to the Lord your God with your whole heart and your whole being. It's not just a line from Deuteronomy. It'll become the heart of Jesus' preaching in the four Gospels. So at those times when we recognize ourselves more as the priest and Levite as opposed to the Good Samaritan, let's not condemn ourselves, but rather recognize the invitation from the Lord to renew our commitment to him and to our relationship with him. And we do this with a greater openness to the Word, recognizing that the Lord is already speaking in our hearts, beckoning us to something greater, offering us healing, offering us grace and strength to live differently, to live authentically as a beloved child of God. It's an invitation to a deeper devotion to the sacraments, especially reconciliation in the Eucharist. And there's a renewed desire to serve Christ and the one who is near in our neighbor. So, my friends, in the liturgy today, Jesus asks us very simply, do you love God? Do you love your neighbor? And I suspect, following his pattern the last few weeks of the Gospels we've heard, he'll ask us once again, do you love me? And he's also telling us that this love is not burdensome, but rather it's the path to joy. It's the way to eternal life. In loving God and loving others, we begin to live the life of heaven right here, right now. So, my friends, let's ask for the grace to return to the Lord with all our hearts, to meet him anew in prayer, in the sacraments, and in our service to one another.